Hello and welcome to this episode of Making Connections, the BattleCON analysis show where I, your host, Marco DeSantos, also known as Mechanic Rig, try my best not to do so badly at playing BattleCON online. In this episode, I will demonstrate a concept called the threat of power by playing Cadenza. Let's get to the game. So, welcome to the show, Kuryun, Cadenza versus Cadenza. Now this will prove the threat of power double-fold. So what is the threat of power? Well, essentially the threat of power is that you have an attack that is so powerful that your opponent tends to play around it. And by doing so, you actually benefit a lot by just not playing that attack. Many people know that for Cadenza, such an attack would be something like Clockwork Shot, where the opponent is so scared to get hit by it that they often do things to play around it. So let's try to prove this theory. Can we win if we only play Clockwork Shot when it 100% guarantees a hit on the opponent? That means their dodge has to be down and they have to not be able to clash it. Let's see whether we will be able to do something like this in this video. And hopefully, this proves just how powerful it can be. So, in this beat, I'm definitely scared of something like a hydraulic drive, which I expect will be what's gonna hit me. So I'm definitely gonna play hydraulic press.
Kill order.
Kill
Confirmed.
order. Confirmed. Though in my opinion, I did make a mistake and I should have probably just played mechanical press instead. I will not anti anything. It is inefficient to do so. My opponent just clockwork shotted as well. I see. So now we have clashed, and Clockwork cannot hit except by using Drive, which will have one priority. So if I do shot, I should be able to clash Clockwork Drive and force a miss. My opponent also has Clockwork Press. Actually, I should just burst, and I should actually be safe from everything my opponent will do.
Routine set.
Excellent! Unfortunately, we will both miss, but that's fine in my opinion.
Retreating.
So remember that the plan is that I will only Clockwork Shot when my opponent has no dodge. And because my opponent will be very
Advancing.
I think my opponent made a mistake. They definitely should have advanced too.
Advancing.
They definitely should have advanced too.
Organ.
Not that it matters so much.
See.
Maybe they wanted to stay in the middle of the board. That way they would be able to...
System shutting down.
Of course. Maybe they wanted to stay in the middle of the board. That way they could still burst and do a variety of other things without having to worry about my stuff. That's also a possibility. So again, we will keep this Clockwork Shot until my opponent ruins themselves by trying to play around it constantly. Definitely a battery dodge seems good on this beat.
Combat routine.
This also clashes his battery dodge, which means I can do some crazy stuff afterwards. A battery burst. So see how this is working out, right? If I advance 3... Actually, we want to stay as near as possible.
Advancing.
So this definitely played into Clockwork Shot, like, very heavily so.
Retreating.
Alright.
Executing routine. Eviscerate.
We will stay on theme. We will wait for my opponent to do something weird. I definitely want to do Mech Drive. Then I should just Mech Press, right? Mech Press. Yes, welcome. Hi sir, welcome to...
Orders confirmed.
Hi sir, welcome to McDonald's. Would you want a Mech Press?
Mike Labs.
Mechanical Press would definitely be interesting here. It's a relatively slow attack. And it allows me to set up for the next beat. A hydraulic press. Alright, this is very good for me, because whoever's press goes first usually wins.
Advancing. Terminating.
I take 2. My opponent takes 4.
Damage threshold exceeded.
So I do not actually want to move. If I go into the corner, my opponent can actually dodge backwards. But that's actually fine. Who has more ranged options between the two of us? It's about even.
What's your orders? Advancing.
I'll just stay in melee range. Okay. So my opponent's gonna play some clockwork. Some clockwork, right? It has to be some form of clockwork. A hydraulic strike is definitely not a bad attack. It also counters the grasp. So I'm definitely okay with a hydraulic strike on this beat. And I just need to see whether or not my opponent will finally choose to do their dodge. Because as long as they hold that dodge, I'm gonna hold my clockwork shot. Pass? Perhaps this is the dodge that we've been expecting. There you go. So my opponent's real option is only to go either backwards all the way here, or they can also possibly go here, and they can go here or here. So they have to switch sides. So if my opponent switches sides with me, that's a good thing.
Advancing.
Alright, that's definitely a good thing.
Retreating. Harvesting.
Okay, so now I have a feeling that my opponent will do Clockwork Shot. So what attack from Cadenza beats Clockwork Shot? How can my Cadenza beat his Cadenza's Clockwork Shot?
Target locked.
I guess the obvious answer is to just do my own Clockwork Shot, clash his Clockwork Shot, and then when he attempts for the drive, I just drive as well, and then I burst. That seems to be completely reasonable. I like that clash chain. So again, my opponent has probably been playing around this Clockwork Shot this entire game, and now I get a free, quote-unquote, Clockwork Shot hit in. So I shall pass. Oh, a battery shot. That's interesting. I don't know why my opponent didn't take the Clockwork Shot. Regardless, I trade heavily in my favor. So now my threat drops to 0 at this point, right? Because now I have no attack that my opponent is continuously scared of, such that they will dodge and do all of these crazy maneuvers to try and avoid it. However, I do still have some backup safeties. I can do battery press and mechanical press and all of these other attacks. I feel like a battery press is actually... a mechanical press might be good in this beat. I'm definitely going to go for a mechanical press this beat, because it's definitely going to be slower than any attack my opponent plays. If this is a clockwork, that's fine. I'll have stun guard 6, and then I'll be able to trade like 6 against my opponent. So definitely my opponent's always going to be faster. So I can always do this anti-power and make sure that his press does not get buffed by my own anti-power. However, if my opponent decides to anti-power in response, stun immunity, okay, this might be a case of the opponent not understanding how Cadenza works. Because Cadenza has no way to be able to counter. Quite an interesting attack, Clockwork Drive. Perhaps my opponent was expecting me to go fast. Perhaps my opponent was expecting me to do a burst play, which was not an unreasonable thing to think. So I think my opponent will advance 1 and hit me for 6. And then I shall retaliate for 9? Wait. Yes, okay, there you go. I think that would have almost killed my opponent. So my opponent definitely does not want to be killed. I will advance 1 space. My opponent's actually being very smart with their positioning by keeping the center of the board. In the previous video I released, I was talking about how important something like that was, staying in the center of the board. Feedback field. How likely do I think will my opponent will play feedback field?
Target locked.
How much range? Okay, so if I just do battery drive, if he does feedback field, I'll advance to and just whiff it.
Order confirmed.
So this is a cool thing about BattleCON, right? You can choose to just whiff your attacks if it's not optimal for you.
Auxiliary power.
My opponent's anti-ing power. Do I want my opponent to drop down to 3? Yes, because then Grapnel would be strong.
Sharpening.
That should be a little bit...
Spinning up.
Oh, he's spinning up. Okay, he wants to go fast? I have no problem with that because I can always just reactively Iron Body. So, it's okay. I'll conserve my force for more damage. Hydraulic Grasp. Quite an interesting move in my opinion.
Advancing.
Okay, so now my opponent can either push me here or push me here or pull me here. I highly recommend my opponent pull me here. That way, when I drive, I'm forced to drive myself out of the corner. Not a very smart idea, opponent.
Confirmed.
So now, I'm gonna spend an Iron Body to gain 99 Stun Guard. Then I'm gonna advance to into the corner.
Advancing.
And 100% win the next beat.
Organ harvest commencing.
Ah, but the feedback field.
System reboot required.
The feedback field is quite troublesome, actually. So I have a big feeling that the thing that I'm about to eat is a feedback field. Because I could definitely do my Clockwork Shot right now, and it's 100% gonna hit. Because my opponent has no way to clash it. Well, that might be a lie, because my opponent can do Mechanical Burst. If I do get Mech Bursted, it's actually okay if I get Mech Bursted. But if I get Feedback Fielded, I die. So now my opponent is exerting Threat of Power on me with this finisher. By keeping this finisher, my opponent is essentially preventing me from doing my Clockwork Shot right now. Because I'm personally too scared to actually go for it.
Please enter the administrator password to continue. Your enemies will fall.
The admin password's admin, just so you know. So I'm gonna dodge this beat because I am so scared of feedback
Target
field.
locked.
And if my opponent does end up playing feedback field here,
Engaging auxiliary power.
yeah, I'm betting this is feedback field. So in my opinion, my opponent shouldn't have played feedback field. Because it gets rid of all of his threat of power.
Charging thalmic battery.
So now that my opponent has done this, now their threat of power disappears entirely, and I'm able to freely do whatever attack I want.
Advancing. Feedback field.
Let's swap finisher cards. I feel like feedback field is going to be a little bit more useful. So without a drive in his hand, Mech Burst actually does really well. So Mechanical Burst it will be...
Dark Master.
This is going to be the fun part. If my opponent does dodge, this Mechanical Burst actually sets up for the Clockwork Shot next beat. So I'll pass. Yep, that's the dodge. Okay, so where does my opponent dodge?
Advancing.
Okay, that's an interesting place to go. I will definitely only retreat one.
Retreating. Blood will be shed.
Okay, and I think my opponent just dug their own grave. By doing battery dodge on this beat, my opponent now has zero possibility of clashing my Clockwork Shot. So now I can just Clockwork Shot and win the game. Yes. Yes. So, congratulations everyone, the threat of power has worked. My opponent was very scared
Default combat routine.
of all of my stuff. They did a battery dodge when it would have been more beneficial to do something else entirely. And now I'm gonna Clockwork Shot, anti-power, and destroy them. I think my opponent has realized what has happened.
Engaging auxiliary power.
Yes, we are both gonna be engaging our auxiliary power.
Sharpening.
Sharpening. This has been a fun game. Thank you, Korean. Korean. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I will not anti anything else, and this should be a 100% guaranteed win victory. Congratulations, everyone. It was a fun game. And that's the threat of power for you.
Executing routine. Eviscerate.
Eviscerate. I love Cadenza. The voice lines are so fun. And...
Join
boom!
me. Oh.
Game over.
Mission
Complete. Alright, that was a great game. Let's move on to the end of game summary. So, that was a very interesting game. I was able to showcase threat of power in both ways because I was able to show how my opponent was so scared of Clockwork Shot that they were doing things that weren't necessarily ideal and ended up with them giving me a 100% guaranteed win beat the next beat. On the other hand, my opponent also showed me some threat of power by using their overdrive finisher really well. Feedback field was very scary for me on that one beat and I was forced to dodge. However, where my opponent went wrong was rather than keeping their attack in hand, and therefore having that threat of power, my opponent decided to play their attack immediately and then lose the threat of power. This is where that concept is very important. It's very important to understand that those attacks are quite strong. However, sometimes not playing them might actually be stronger than actually playing them. So this has been this episode of Making Connections. Hopefully all of you enjoyed it. If you like this video, please give us a like, a comment, and subscribe if you haven't yet. And without much else to say, don't forget your special action, and thank you, World of Indians. Thank you, and good night.